Hello, and welcome to our Shape Live event today. I'm Tom Booth, and I work on developing new language learning products at Cambridge University Press and Assessment. Shape Education is a joint initiative from Cambridge University Press and Assessment and the Cambridge Judge Business School, with the goal of bringing people together to accelerate change in education. And Shape Live is our series of bite-sized events spotlighting key challenges and opportunities. Today, we're looking at personalisation in education. We'll be hearing some perspectives on what personalised learning is and the value it can bring to learning, both in terms of an individual's learning journey and in terms of what we want education to be like and what we want it to deliver. To help us explore this, I'm delighted to be joined today by our two speakers. Vivek Agarwal has been an Edtech entrepreneur in India for over 22 years, and he's the founder of Liqvid, which is a specialised digital learning company. Liqvid provides a range of personalised, AI-enabled and other learning solutions with a particular focus on English language learning to global organisations. Hi Vivek, nice to see you today, thanks for coming. And Rosina Dorelli is the founder and director of Davinci Life Skills, which is an organisation based here in Cambridge in the UK that's building a new vision for the future of education. It's creating the opportunity for research and development, as well as teacher training in transdisciplinary, contextual, project-based learning and formative assessment. Hi, Rosina. Thanks very much for joining us today as well. So welcome both of you, and massive welcome to everyone who's joined us today. So we're going to give each of our two speakers 10 minutes in a moment to share their perspectives, and then we'll pose your questions in the discussion. So we'd really love to hear your observations, your questions and your comments. So please do use the chat and ask questions and comments, suggestions, any ideas as we go along. And also please do use our hashtag #ShapeLive when sharing in your networks. Okay, so first of all, we have a poll for you today, and you can access the poll via the chat. We'd like to know which types of data do you think are most important for personalising learning? Okay, please tell us which types of data you think are most important for personalising learning, and also please tell us why. So complete the poll, and also in the chat, please tell us why as well. We'll be coming back to the results of the poll a bit later on. Okay, so we'll be here until for about 45 minutes today. If you can't stay for the whole event, say if you've got a lesson to teach or a meeting to go to, that's fine. A recording will be available afterwards on our YouTube channel and also at shapeeducation.org. And we'll be continuing the conversation in our Shape Education events channel on LinkedIn. Okay, so let's get going. Vivek, please could you start us off?
Sure. Thank you, Tom, and good afternoon to everybody in the UK. Good evening to everybody in India. I will just put my screen up to share my screen. What's wrong with last screen? Okay, can you see my screen? Okay. Okay. So personalization has been, Wikipedia says that the term personalization has been around since the 1960s. And I think teachers all over the world have tried their own brand of personalization and all of that. But clearly, the ability to personalize at scale is now available through these developments in technology, which means that we can collect a lot of data and we can analyze it, and an introduction of AI into the mix. So it's completely it's taken on a very, very new meaning now than it would have in the past, let's say 20-30 years prior to the 10-year period. There is So the problem, the way we define it, the problem with learning is that you have, that it depends so much on what the learner wants to do. It's so much inside the learner's head, right? And that's not easy always to understand. I may not want to learn even if the best teacher may be teaching me, but I may not, for any reason, may not want to learn. I may not learn. So you need. So there are lots and lots of possibilities or probabilities or on how you would achieve personalization. The assumption being that if the learning is personalized to my tastes, my behavior, my requirements, I'll learn better, right? So how do we achieve this in the new sort of new age, if as it were? We use a combination of data. So we have a platform which our customers use, and we got about 1 million learners on that platform, who've got about 100 million data points, and we use that to do our analysis. And I'll share some of these findings with you as we in the subsequent presentation. Then these data is analyzed using deep maths. I mean, linear equations is a important process when we make our forecasting or personalization of the learning paths or stuff like that. Statistics is we use a lot of k-means factor for clustering, for example, which means that for combining learners into groups, and I'll show you some examples of that. A lot of this stuff is also what you might call probabilistic. It may not be, it's not completely deterministic in a sense that it doesn't have a yes or no answer. It can have, the solution may be, there may be probabilities attached to solutions. So you have to go so you use the data, analyze it through maths, and you implement it through AI-based technologies and approaches, LSTM, NLP, whatever. I mean, lots of these, and you choose which one works best for you. Now, like I said, learning is a very complex process, right? We came across, I mean, we use this sort of framework that we've taken from a research paper. We look at learning in a broader dimension, and not just so tutor agent, which is sort of the cognitive area, how much we know compared to what we need to know. Then there is the emotional agent. I think we've been doing a lot of work on we haven't yet exactly frozen on how emotions work, but clearly it has a huge impact. So many times I've seen my daughter, for example, pick up things very quickly when she's more inclined or in a good mood, and versus when she's not inclined, then she takes forever to even grapple with simple things. So emotions clearly play a big part. Then the third part is the style agent. Now, style agent is, it's been interpreted. So we started thinking about it in terms of personality, in terms of learning style, visual, kinesthetic, and so on and so forth, then the behavior types. But then we realized that if we were to use those frameworks, then we would need definitely different types of content for each type of learner. For example, if multiple intelligences, right? You need somebody who's musically inclined would need different type of content, somebody who's say mathematically inclined, right? So, and that is not a feasible option for most learning solutions, right? So we didn't go there. We focused on seeing what the behavior was. And we looked at data. So, how often were people visiting, what were they doing, how much time were they spending, and so on and so forth. And that's how I'll share some of those findings in the subsequent slides. So I believe this framework provides a more holistic approach to defining personalization. Here's an example of actually the cognitive part. Now, this is a thing I've taken. So this is from a course being offered at Coursera, which is Small Talk and Conversational Vocabulary by Georgia Institute of Technology, available on Coursera, right? And the same course, a great platform, great publisher, but two very different feedback. I mean, there's this person, Vita K, who's very happy with the course. I mean, helps me to understand what is the meaning of small talk, blah, blah, blah. She's given 5 stars. Now, same course, there's a person, Fan Z, who's given 1 star. And the course is the worst one that I've ever seen, right? Now, for the same program, and for this program, there were 20% of people who rated it 3 or below, right? And of course, a lot of them rated it 4 and above, which means that a lot of people love it, but there are a sizable number that doesn't like it, right? So there's nothing wrong with the course at all, but it's just what the learners want and need, right? So then, so here are a couple of other data points that, on style, like I said. So we found that we found that there are a lot of these learners, many of these learners come more often and consume less content, right, each time they come. And simultaneously, there is a set of people who come less often but consume more each time. So we call them bite-sized. And then the first one we call bit-sized. So here, if you see on the screen, it's just so this total time is the total time the learner has spent on the platform. And this is the average session time, sorry. The average session time that the learner has spent, per visit. And you can see clearly that, there are people who are, so people who are big users, right? I mean, people who don't use the platform much, there doesn't seem to be a lot of differentiation. But people who use the platform seriously, there's a clear breakup where, a lot of them are spending less time, but visiting more and the other way around. Right. And so just having, just designing a learning path based on this insight is a very good way of achieving personalization, I believe. Similarly, when they learn. So same kind of data where we say that, the weekday visits versus weekend visits. And you can see that there are, again, clusters emerging that are quite clear. There are a lot of people who come on both times, but there are. So I think personalization for the 20-30% of learners that are not engaged is where the real value will get delivered. And this is the last slide that I have, which basically on the content type. So interestingly enough, you see now everybody likes quizzes, right? I mean. So here we found that there are people who spend, let's say, 70% of time on the quizzes on an average, right? Which is commonsensical. People love quizzes, but they are not the highly engaged learners because the total amount of time they're spending on the platform is quite low, right? The real people who are engaged, high engagement, are people who are spending 50% of the time on quiz and 32% on gaming. So this is a program we have as there's a simple gaming sort of module, right? And so actually you found that this is so this really helps not just personalize the learner's perspective, but also how you build better courses that can be personalized to different learner and deliver in the way that the learners prefer, and will therefore engage with the content a lot more, right? So that's what I had to say. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Vivek. That was really interesting. Really interesting to see how you're using data to put students into categories according to their learning style. Also, I was really interested to see how you've had your model has an emotional dimension as well as an ability dimension. I thought that was fascinating to see. Please do keep any thoughts, questions, comments, ideas, please put them in the chat. Anyone who's watching who wants to ask any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. And we'll come back to you, Vivek, for questions after we've heard from Rosina. So for anyone just joining us, there's a poll in the chat for you. So please look at the poll and also share your comments and questions in the chat. And we'll pick up on those when we move on to our discussion in around 10 minutes time. Okay, so Rosina, when you're ready.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Vivek. Really interesting and exciting. I think the future is exciting. Let me share my screen and show you what we're up to. So, Davinci life skills. Let me just hide that. So Davinci Life Skills Cambridge is our company. I'm a co-founder with Zachary Resnicek and Farhan Mir, and we are building a showcase model for the future of education. And our mission is to educate the entrepreneurs and world builders of the future in a creative, ethical and sustainable way. And also we're trying to incorporate into that a much more personalized type of learning. So what I want to do is take you back to the point of education. So I think when you're beginning to design a new model for education, we should really ask, what is education for? And if we think of ourselves as a species, we are one of many species on this planet. We are one of the species of great apes, and we have an environment where we flourish, and we have to then ask, well, how would we want our young to be educated? And the way we've looked at it is we've gone back to the evolution of our species and thought, well, we've evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in tribal communities, and we've evolved through a form of communication and expression that's really been about storytelling, dance, song, adornment, ritual, and rites of passage. And our most recent, our current education system is quite different looking from that. So there's lots of wonderful things about our education system currently, but as John Dewey says in this quote here, if we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. So so looking at the problems that we've currently got, I mean, there's the one size fits all model, as you can see from this photograph. It's a very different thing that we're dealing with than the colorful tribal environment that I showed in the other picture. We've got our kids in suits, in rectilinear buildings, doing clerical work a lot of the time. And our question is our current education system really preparing students with all the skills that they need in life? Is it what is the current design and the model we have what we really want is it what we want to educate our young? Is this the prime model? And it seems to me, from my experience of teaching in state secondary schools, that grades seem to be a huge thing that we value right now. And they are being tested in high stakes exams, which are causing high levels of stress, anxiety, depression, and I've witnessed some really worrying experiences with kids cutting themselves, kids on suicide watch in my classrooms. And just the fact here that a third of students are failing to achieve a C or above in their GCSEs is a really worrying statistic. And so we're allowing us 1/3 of our young to go into the world feeling like failures. And this isn't really ethical or sustainable. On top of that, business has found that students coming out of schools and universities are lacking fundamental skills like teamwork, self-management, customer awareness, problem solving, as well as communication and literacy. So the experts, if you go to university and you look into education, there's hundreds of years of research on how we could be doing this better. The problem is it hasn't really been implicated and it's not really in practice. Things like formative assessment and project-based learning. There's tons of research out there to say that we could be doing this and how we could be doing this. So I don't know if many of you may have seen Ken Robinson's talk, "Do Schools Kill Creativity?" It's the most watched and shared TED talk of all time. And in it, he says that we are mining our children's minds like we strip mine the earth for one commodity, and it's not sustainable because many highly talented, brilliant, creative people think that they're not. And this isn't really acceptable. And I think it's really summed up the issues that we're facing with things like league tables and high grades and teaching to the test. Gert Biester sums this up really well in this quote, that this has to do with the question of whether we are indeed measuring what we value or whether we're just measuring what we can easily measure, so that targets and indicators of quality become mistaken for quality itself. It's no longer a question of what schools can do for their students, but what students can do for their schools. So how are we going to then go forward from this? Well, the way we're looking at it is that we've got an amazing advance in technology and sciences, engineering, maths, and the arts. And we also have this incredible history, this rich history of communication and expression. And what we're suggesting is this convergence of this ancestral wisdom that we have with this technology that could take us into a biophilic, sustainable future. The wonderful thing about tech, and the World Economic Forum has a whole vision for the future of education that revolves around tech, and the kind of companies that Vivek is creating, is that possibility that lots of subjects like maths and sciences could be assessed online. There's a chance for education to be more global, that teachers from all over the world could be connected, that learning could be more self-paced and personalized and collaborative and student-driven. But what we're suggesting is, on top of that, is that we also need community spaces, so that schools could become a place of community. So our vision is that we create a biophilic education movement, because biophilia is the passionate love of life and all that is alive. And biophilic design has been found to support not only physical health and psychological well-being, but also cognitive function. And that's a really profound statement, that if we make our environments more suited to where we can flourish, so places that are more organic, not just by bringing green things into the classroom, but having rooms and spaces that are really designed around what our species needs, so how we can flourish, really can make a difference to how well we think. So if an education was biophilic, what might that mean? We're suggesting that that would be nurturing humans holistically, so looking at not just our knowledge, but also our whole human ecosystem, and how that is part of a local and global ecosystem. So a biophilic education system, therefore, might be looking at not just sort of the extra side to a human being, so not just the knowledge, but also our imagination and our intuition, our ability to have empathy and compassion, our sense of adventure and exploration and curiosity, creating centres where we can collaborate and have schools, because if learning and assessment, some learning and assessment can go online, and things like your maths exam you can do whenever online, so it also doesn't have to be in a high stakes exam situation, that you can then free up time within the curriculum to have community collaboration and things like a community food project, for example. So it's that mixing of low tech and high tech that we're talking about. So our curriculum, we've designed a curriculum with 5 project pathways, which are contextual and transdisciplinary. So we're bringing together all of the traditional subjects into these 5 projects. And within each of these projects, we are making sure that it's not just the academic critical thinking reasoning that we are nurturing in our students, but we also want to pay attention to the physical, the movement, the practical side of the human, the social and emotional side, so looking at self-management and teamwork, and also the creative and intuitive ideation and problem solving. And what we're suggesting is it's time for change, and that's us. So I don't know if I've done my whole 10 minutes.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. That was pretty much spot on. Thanks a lot, Rosina. That was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. And also thanks to everybody who has been posting questions and comments in the chat as well. Please do keep those coming. So we've heard from both our speakers, and we're going to open up to questions. But first of all, let's start by looking at your responses to the poll that we put in the chat earlier. So we asked which types of data you think are most important for personalising learning. And I can see that the most frequent response was previous learning interests and preferences, and that's quite a clear winner. Then followed by confidence scores or self-evaluation. So interestingly, confidence scores or self-evaluation was slightly more popular than correct or incorrect responses. And then following that, we've got open written or audio responses, diagrams, drawings, and visual responses. And finally, physical and emotional states was mentioned as well. Vivek or Rosina, would you like to comment on anything there at all?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, I think considering that, the way the whole data thing works, that you need the past data to actually forecast what's going to happen or how best it might work. So that's, truly reflective of the way the system works. And I'm glad people have thought of it as, have mentioned, many people have mentioned the emotional aspect, which we are also very key. We're exploring quite a bit. I think, still need to do more work, but very interesting to see the feedback.
Yeah, I think that self-evaluation is one thing that's really exciting. Part of what we're looking at is formative assessment really opens up the field for much more, not only just self-assessment, but also peer assessment, and that support from your cohort as well. But I think what's really also exciting about the tech possibilities in terms of things like assessment and personal learning is, as I said before, it's that ability to go and do your exams anytime you like online. You can go and test yourself, and that's amazing. So that ability to, okay, we don't need these high stakes exams anymore. We can go and do a test like you do a music exam. You could go do your piano grade 5, or you can do your maths grade 1, 2, 3, or 5, and an algorithm is doing that test. So it takes away that onus of it being this pressurized, stressful moment, this one-time chance that you have in high stakes exams. And then I think that would free up more time in the classroom for doing fun project-based learning. Because I think one of the issues that's been thought of in terms of it being online is that it's harder to assess certain things like creative thinking and teamwork possibly online. But maybe we could free up those type of things for more personalized assessment as well, in a project-based setting. So that would be more formative, and the online assessment could be then more algorithmic, if that makes sense.
Brilliant, thanks very much. So I'm not sure if you've been able to see the chat as you've been focusing on your talks, but we've had a lot of questions coming in through the chat. I wondered, have you had a chance to look at these, and are there any particular questions that you would like to tackle now? Have you seen any that you'd like to start with, or shall I go ahead and start us off?
I think there's a question that the data suggests some learners are more engaged than others. Is there evidence that, that's a very, this is from, I think, Katrina Luna from Manila, maybe. No, so, oh, sorry, this question is from Paul. Question number 2, it says. I think, so I will tell you my experience in this. There is, so the way we build the models is that there is a learning insight. I mean, there is, insight as educators and learners. You say, okay, we think learners learn differently according, some learn better weekdays, weekends, or whatever it is. And then you create a hypothesis, and then you test it on data. And once it sort of works, then you expand it, and then you get the feedback and all that. So I think where we are, we have in our hypotheses and in our testing stage, we have found good correlation between what we think works and what needs to work. I think the solution needs to deploy at larger scale for it to be definitive on for each. And then there are so many situations. So about education, as all of us understand, there's no one formula, right? I mean, nobody can say this is the best way of learning, right? So it's different for everybody. So therefore, proving the effectiveness is difficult. But without going into too much, too much sort of, let's say, too much, or let me put it more generally and sort of at a higher level. if we believe that if learners spend more time learning, they learn more, right? I mean, so if we can create engagement where they spend more time, then they learn more, right? I mean, that's so even if we achieve that, and that has been achieved in several areas, in several places, so there is plenty of sort of proof around that.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. I guess maybe following on from Paul's question, I think the idea of engagement is fascinating. And I guess maybe a bit like personalization, it's a term which is used a lot and maybe means different things when different people say it, the word engagement. Maybe one element of engagement might be the extent to which learners can maybe take control of their learning. Maybe that's one dimension to see engagement. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that. Is it enough, for example, for personalization to just give learners what we think is best for them? Or is it also important for learners to have some sense of control on what they believe is important for them to do next and take control of their learning in that way as well?
Yeah, so, definitely. I'd like to, sorry.
Is that me or go on, Rosina? It's fine.
No, I definitely feel passionate about that. I think that's so, it's so important that there's self-motivation and that there's some chance, because it's a dictatorship that we currently have in education, that students are told everything. These are the facts. It's spoon-fed data is what's going on at the minute, but to personalize it and create that that inner incentive to want to do it, that motivation to do it, is the intrinsic motivation, that's the potential that we've got now. And I agree with Vivek. I think that chance, I mean, my daughter, when she learns something, she goes on YouTube to learn it. She doesn't, it's not necessarily learned at school. School is about community and meeting friends. But if she wants to learn something, I just go on YouTube and learn it. So that's how she's using her personalized learning. What I'm suggesting there was a question here that said, how does biophilic education personalize learning? What we're suggesting, one of our projects is called a PEP project, which is a personal exploration. And so with project-based learning, the chance really is that all the outcomes could be different. So even if you're hitting certain targets and learning objectives within the project, the outcomes can all be very different, and the student can be looking at how they respond. So they might come, one student in a project might be building a table, and another one might be designing a bag, or it could be anything. But so when you allow it and open it up to different outcomes, but they're all working on the same project, then it can really personalize learning, I think.
Yeah. I think the model that I'm proposing is more for online learning, self-learning online. I mean, and which is where, Tom, to your question, these restrictions don't apply. I mean, typically we have two learning paths. One is sort of more prescriptive. Okay, so you say, okay, this is where you are, this is where you want to be, and this is how you go. The other is more sort of recommended, like a Netflix kind of. Where just the system gently suggests you might want to try this, you might want to try this, and a learner feels their control. And we found that both models sort of work in this thing. And combining it with, so we are working on a project here in India, for example, where very interesting, combining the classroom with the. So what we're doing is based on so teachers teach, and they teach obviously the same thing to the entire class, but class is at different levels. So the system, I mean, the teachers conducts the assessments, and the system generates automated sort of homework based on the individual learner's level. So even though it's the same teacher, the same class, but students are getting different sets of practice questions to take, when they go back and do it home. So that sort of helps learners get to the same level of ability without too much disruption. So I think there are very interesting use cases possible if you apply it the right way and you sort of solutionize it the right way.
I was really interested to see the question from Claire Harrison. I wonder if you got any thoughts on this one. Should learners be given what they prefer, or should it be what they need?
I can answer this too, because there's a lot of debate about democratic learning. And whether you could just allow kids, which some schools do, you just allow kids to, whether they want to turn up or not, and leave it up to them. That's not what we're choosing to do. That might work for some kids, but I think that actually puts a lot of pressure on anyone to suddenly be completely free to choose whatever you want to do. And we tend to, as a human, we tend to not do things that are too difficult or really challenge ourselves all the time. So I think it's useful for schools, and a school's responsibility is to really push students to just over that boundary of what they think they can do and be constantly introducing them to new things. So it's, we think you can do it. So that's the job of a teacher, isn't it? It's to say, this is harder than you think that you can do, but you can do it, and we're going to help you do it. And that then builds that sense of self, like achievement, but being allowed to fail and then get back up again and keep trying. That's the exciting part of education, and that's the real reward. That's where the dopamine comes, is like, I didn't think I could do this, and then you do it and it's like, yes, and then you want to do it again because you want to, oh, I'm going to do something really hard again. But you need to have you need that schools to be pushing you that bit further and introducing you to the difficult stuff too.
Yeah, and that's true for schools. I mean, as you get sort of to the older categories, you know, sort of the higher education and continuing, then of course the importance of choice and all that becomes far more. And I agree with Rosina that at school you can't give too much choice, as it were, about the objectives. Yeah.
I guess personalization.
Sorry, can I just say quickly? I think the older you get, if you train kids at a young age to have that self-management and to really take responsibility for their own learning. So not only are you encouraging them, I think it can get more democratic as you get to high school. If you've really trained students, rather than spoon feed them, if you've trained them to manage their own learning, and then I think there's a chance that you could then make it more democratic and let them decide what they want to do and help support them do their own projects. I think that is possible.
Maybe that kind of touches on a possible definition of personalisation, because, as I say, that's a word that's being used to mean many different things by different people. But perhaps one definition of personalisation might be that it's not only the pace of study or not only the order of content that's personalised, but actually the learning objectives themselves or the learning outcomes themselves are tailored to individual learners. Is that something that you would regard as within the scope of personalisation? And is that something that's harder for technology to do?
So, okay, should I take that first? Okay, so see, the way I would put it is that, let's say if you're a salesperson, if all of us salespeople, but we may have different, you know, we all need a certification at a certain level, but we may already have some prior knowledge, right? So the idea that technology can do is sort of, actually, one of the ways companies are using analytics, of course, is that, let's say, they train you on a product, and then they will monitor, how you are demoing a digital product. You can track the data of, which products I'm demoing, which screens I'm showing, and all that, and you link that back to training as to why, which did I spend enough time on, on the parts that I was supposed to, did I do the right things, and so on and so forth. So, and then I can get inputs into areas that I didn't do so well on. So I think, yes, absolutely. It's, the whole the sort of the micro learning and all of that stuff is becoming more and more important. And technology enables that beautifully. I think the challenge is, the content, in the sense that I see a lot of challenge. The way content has to be packaged, tagged, managed is going to be very different for this technology to work well. So the technology exists now. The content is where we are actually spending a lot more time and trying to package it together.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it can be also, you've got the possibility of making digital online portfolios with technology, and within that portfolio of your work. So instead of just having a set of grades, I've got a bunch of A stars, what does that actually mean? You can have a full website to say, this is what I've done. Look at these projects, look at all of this. These are videos, images, essay. You can have it all there, audio, presentations, as well as a whole collection of all of the exams you might have sat online. So you could have gone and done, well, I've done a food health and safety exam, I've done maths level 5, I've done physics online exam, as well as I've done a music grade, I've done this. And you can have a whole plethora of different qualifications that you could add to your digital portfolio that says, this is me and this is my individual journey. And I think that's the potential really for personalizing learning much better, because what is an A star? I mean, so many people have got tons of A stars. It's like, well, how is that personalizing? How does either a university or an employer really know? But you have to then read the personal statement, because that's what's of value. So maybe if we can really look at a different way of presenting and assessing students, I think that's the real potential with online.
So I guess in your experience, thinking about it from a teacher's perspective, in your experience, how do teachers engage with the idea of personalised learning? Is that something that teachers tend to value? And if so, what training or what resources do you think teachers need in order to be able to really make the most of the opportunities of personalised learning?
That's the best question, because that's the hardest thing. I think most students are more practiced in tech learning than I think teachers are. And I think most teachers don't have time in the day to learn. And the thought of a PD day is usually like, oh no, I haven't got time to do personal development. I've got like too much work to do. And so I think that's going to take time. That's the area that's just going to take a lot of time to slowly integrate. And all the new teachers that are coming up, they really need to be trained in this area. I mean, what we're doing is setting up a teacher training center, so for project-based learning and for this new model, because I think that is the biggest issue. I just don't think currently, I mean, there's things like mathletics from the schools that I've been in, and there is lots of ways that we use technology, but it's the amount of training that it takes to really incorporate it properly into the system. And I think you've also got the issue like all the different platforms and it keeps evolving all the time. And it's like, oh gosh, I can't keep up with how many different things that they've got to do with technology. So I think that, yeah, that's definitely the hard part. What do you think, Vivek?
Yeah, no, I think in one sense, the education, I mean, the education industry is different because it's so heavily regulated. But in that sense, we see the same challenges in organizations. There's so much technology, and implementing a new system, a new technology in a company is every bit as challenging as, so I think there is a real challenge there. And I think there's a question about, what role the teachers will play. I think teachers, we have to get them more comfortable with using data. So they become the ideal role, I think, in future for the teachers to be a facilitator, a database facilitator, do is more interaction, the social skills, the sort of, group activities physically in a class, and let the factual knowledge, the data, let students pick it up on their own outside the class. But that will need a huge ability on part of the teacher, and I think the flexibility in the system to allow that. And I think those are very, very difficult challenges. No easy answers, I'm sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
We've got time for one more kind of quick fire question, if that's okay, before we finish. I'm really interested to hear from your point of view in personalizing learning. What haven't you solved yet? So what's the next problem that you'd like to solve next? What are you trying to solve in the future, and what help do you need to solve it?
Oh, that's a good question. There's probably loads. I think probably that one actually is the teacher training. I think that is how do we get this to make this happen sooner, to support students. We really need to get this out there. That's what we're trying to do. I mean, we're trying to build a model so it can inspire that change, and run pilots so we can go into schools and support that kind of teacher development, and that kind of, how does this future vision look? But yeah, there's lots of it's just going to take time, also because you've got changing assessment to something that's online. There's a big business assessment. There's a lot of money in GCSEs and A-levels, and companies that are making a lot of money out of it aren't going to just give that up until you present them with another way of making that kind of money. So, and you've got in the UK, we've got things like Ofsted and league tables and it's not going to be easy to overcome those type of things. And schools are currently being judged with how many A stars or how many over C grades they're getting. So the whole system right now has been set up to judge kids, students, teachers on these grades. And to change that, I think probably that's what needs changing. That's what we need help changing. And we need to get the message out that maybe a whole load of A stars isn't the most valuable thing that we can push our students to have, that maybe there's something else more valuable.
Okay, thanks very much. Vivek, very quickly, do you have anything to add?
I think Rosina's clearly, I mean, there's a whole challenge around the policies and implementation. So we are not going there. We're dealing with what we can do. And, you know, what we're focused on is the personalization, like you said. However, I think we just scratched the surface, right? I mean, we have maybe 100 million data points. We need maybe 1 trillion data points to be able to figure out, you know, what exactly is going on in the human mind, and how do you make sure every child and every adult can learn in the way they like. So we look at ourselves as just the starting of this journey. The technology in the last 2-3 years has made this possible, but I think it's going to play out in the next few years to come. And it's going to be very, very exciting. And so we are really focused on that.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. We're definitely going to continue the conversation over on LinkedIn on our Shape Education events channel. So please do use the hashtag Shape Live if you're sharing in your networks. So a massive thank you to Rosina and Vivek for bringing your perspectives and your thoughts. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today. And a huge thanks to you, our audience, and for joining the conversation. I hope you'll be able to join us for our next Shape Live event on 31st of March. So Dr. Jeremy Hannay, who's head teacher at Three Bridges Primary School, which apparently has been referred to as the happiest school on earth, and also Kata Tsuba, apologies if that's not the right pronunciation, who's got a wonderful job title, Head of Flourishing at the School of Humanity. They'll be joining us to discuss how we can innovate for fundamental change in schools. So we really hope to see you there. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more videos like this. But for now, thanks very much and goodbye.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.